Shamblers have destroyed the East Coast. After surviving the horde that attacked Summerland, Jane McKean and Catherine Devereaux are on the road, with California in their future. Their goal, the egalitarian settlement of Nicodemus, for now. We begin with Jane recounting how she arrived at Miss Preston's, traveling by armored train for several days, arriving in Baltimore and then being put on an iron pony bound for the combat school, Miss Preston's. She didn't attend the local schools in Kentucky because there was more demand in the eastern strongholds. White folks made money off of the education of attendants, so they wanted to profit off of their labor through shipping them out east and then having them shipped out further to necessary families. During her first year, she took an extra piece of cornbread and received 10 lashes in front of the whole school. Catherine tried making it seem like Jane deserved punishment, but Jane gets so mad she just slaps Catherine, causing the girl to cry and flee into the plantation style schoolhouse. That's how they become bitter rivals. Part 1 is called In the Garden of Good and Evil. Jane and friends are watching the town of Summerland be consumed by shamblers from a distance. Jane wonders if Gideon or Ida made it out okay. Catherine tries giving her a non-answer. They catch up with the wagon and the Duchess and the others, where Jackson says they should head east past Nicodemus. He reveals that the town might be founded by freedmen from the 5 civilized tribes, but they're still egalitarians, who might be slightly better than the survivalists, but are still not the safest option for people of color, especially black folk. Jane says they have to go, their friends are there. The next chapter is Catherine's perspective, and while Jane's chapters begins with Shakespeare quotes, hers begins with Bible verses. Everyone discusses what to do as they travel north. They agree to go east to Fort Riley because Jackson keeps pressing them, but Jane is the one who's insisting in the end that they go to Nicodemus first. Jackson, he wants to go because he thinks that his wife, yeah, he has a wife, is in Fort Riley. Yeah, he got married a few months before the events of the first book, actually. Jane and Catherine take rear lookout while Jackson guards the lead of their wagon. Catherine tries cheering up Jane, but Jane needs a moment to cry to herself, so she kind of backs off. Catherine does her best to keep her anxiety at bay as it builds inside her. Yeah, she has anxiety. Anxiety. Jane does her best to wipe away the angry tears she feels, mad at feeling so vulnerable, wondering why she isn't good enough for Jackson or really anyone, because a lot of people leave her and she feels like it's her fault. They stop at a cabin after the sun goes down, drinking clean water from a pump, and they get a fire going as Jackson and his sister go hunt rabbits. Catherine treats Jane's open back wounds while they talk on the porch. They're interrupted by a rabbit and Jane shoots it. Jackson caught 2 more and Catherine and Lily head inside. Jane and Jackson hash things out, Jane wondering why he chose another girl. He tells her he wanted someone who doesn't run headlong into danger, someone who is willing to play the role of a nurturing wife and mother. She is heartbroken but shoves aside those feelings as they both go indoors. Everyone eats and heads to bed. Jane takes first watch. Catherine is awoken later by Jackson for her turn, and she arms up and heads outside. Jane wanders up, unable to sleep. Catherine mentions knowing about Jane's penny necklace, having grown up around the famous Laveaus in New Orleans, as in Mary Laveau. Jane is surprised to learn she is not from Virginia. After some more time, Jane asks about Nolans. Catherine tells her how they built and expanded the canals to help wash away the dead. No need for walls or fences when the canal system works so wonderfully. Yellow fever is actually a bigger threat to the area. They're interrupted when they hear shamblers, Catherine telling Jane to wake the others. She runs off and Catherine makes quick work of 7 freshly turned undead. Jackson and Jane come out. Jackson goes to secure the perimeter as they pack up to head out. Jane asks Catherine if they're bad people, like Sheriff Snyder. Catherine tells her about her mother owning a brothel, how they're just survivors doing what they can to stay alive in this world. A scream and gunshot rings through the air as they run to check what it was. They bump into Jackson as the Duchess and others spill out the house and go to ready the wagon. Lily sees the fresh wound on Jackson's arm, a fresh bite wound.
Oh, what? She had to change your last name. Oh, yeah.
Lily and Jackson talk, and afterwards Lily screams and sobs, and Catherine leads her away as he and Jackson walk off into a field for her to put an end to his suffering. They don't have a lot of time for these things. He tells her this was how it was always going to end up for them anyway. She feels herself break as she uses her sickles to put down the dead.
A brave man going in the line of duty like that.
She quickly gathers some of her valuables in a hat and a letter from his boot. The letter she keeps, but the rest goes to Lily as everyone files out. Jane arms every adult, not mincing words about how dangerous their trek will be. They're not more than a mile out when Catherine overrides Jane's orders and tells the girls to ride in the wagon. They're exhausted from running alongside it, while Thomas and Lily are the only ones riding in the wagon. Catherine and Jane hang back a little, with Catherine slapping Jane to get her to fight her, to help her get out her frustrations for the last few days' events, so she doesn't take it out on the others. It helps a little, and they begin to jog after the girls and Thomas. They stop to clear an overturned wagon that's in their way, full of the dead, and push the carriage off the road before the undead close in. They hop on the wagon at a full trot, Catherine and Jane working together to shoot some of the dead in the lead to slow down the horde. So like Catherine would take some out so that the ones that were in front would fall forward and that would trip up any behind them and help slow down the horde that's chasing them. Unfortunately, their horse goes down before they can celebrate, too tired to stand. But Jane gets it to stand with the help of one of the Duchess's girls and shoots a round off to scare it into running away from them, leading the Shambler horde in that direction. They race off as a group before having to witness the carnage. They walk the rest of the day before they come upon Nicodemus, with Sue and other Miss Preston's girls on guard duty there to greet them. Before they can get inside, Sheriff Daniel Redfern arrests Jane for murder.
Are you kidding me? Are you out of your mind?
As he escorts her into town, Miss Duncan appears wearing the badge of town deputy. She tells Jane how many of the girls who now protect Nicodemus came from another combat school for mixed race black indigenous girls. Miss Preston's didn't like that type of racial mixing, thinking it lowered their value. Jane has become a legend in the town thanks to Sue telling them about her deeds as the Angel of the Crossroads back in Baltimore. But that doesn't change the fact that half the town, most of whom are white survivors of Summerland, want her to pay for killing Sheriff Snyder.
I'm supposed to feel sorry for that bitch. I don't.
Mayor Hamish Washington calms the crowd, ensuring them there will be justice as Jane is locked into a cell. Gideon is there but doesn't say much. Then it's just Sheriff Redfern and Miss Duncan interviewing Jane about the events of Summerland. Before she even begins to open up, she demands to know what happened while she was at Summerland. Redfern recounts how he went back to Baltimore after freeing Jackson, dropped off some black folk in the South for Mayor Carr that he would sell. They had bite wounds, so their rights were forfeit under the 13th Amendment in this universe. On the way back to Baltimore, the horde had overrun the city. Miss Preston's girls got out with Amelia. Many of the faculty, including Miss Preston, fell in the escape. They found the train not following the roads to avoid running into trouble and helped Redfern and the train's crew escape Baltimore County. They switched trains at the next stop, narrowly avoiding a run-in with another horde moving north, finding the old fort now turned town of Nicodemus. Gideon comes in telling the sheriff and deputy he needs to speak with Jane alone. He does, telling her how he fled only moments before all hell broke loose, helping some of the patrol kids to escape. He wants Jane to convince Nicodemus to get inoculated, even though he has no actual evidence that his vaccine works. Jane tells him so, and he decides to leave her, thinking his inventions can keep them all safe. Jane decides she is running the first chance she gets out of town. Outside, Catherine talks with Sue and the others. They want to run too, but Catherine and Callie, the mayor's daughter, tries to convince the combat school girls that they need to talk sense into folk, but they're set on hightailing it out. Gideon comes out and tells them that Jane won't do what he says, and Ida sides with Jane. Gideon tells Catherine to stop by his place later and leave as Redfern returns, telling the group that they have to disperse. They're already planning to break Jane out of prison and head east to the Kaw River and ride that to the Mississippi. They'll pick up supplies from a town that was attacked a while back on the east. It's Lucas, a boy from the Summerland patrols, who comes up with an idea to break Jane out.
I have a plan.
He also makes it clear that he has a crush on Sue, who we learn from Catherine is one of the few girls who wants to get married and have children someday. Sue and Callie visit Jane by peeking in a window in her cell. They tell her about the railgun going off along the wall. It uses electricity to fire bullets thanks to the windmills that power the town, but has an hour cooldown period. They plan to meet her tomorrow evening and leave just as Miss Duncan arrives to give Jane some food with an extra portion courtesy of Gideon. Jane isn't buying his bribery and warns Amelia that this town will fall to the horde. with Catherine. She meets the Duchess at Gideon's house. Her and the other ladies of the night are discussing leaving at dawn with some Summerland drovers and Thomas. They decide to ask Lily what she wants to do, and she says she wants to see Jane face mob justice. She's still a little bitter about what happened. Catherine takes a moment to talk with her, telling her how Jane only did what Jackson wanted because they loved each other, and how it wasn't easy for Jane to do what she did either. She hugs Lily close as the girl cries, and then she goes to wash and freshen up. Jane hasn't slept all night, and after a breakfast of bread and mystery meat from Miss Duncan, Jane breaks and reads Jackson's letter from his wife. It describes her love and how she was expecting a child when he left to find Lily. Jackson never knew because he couldn't read, and now the baby has either been born or fallen to one of the hordes that are attacking the country. Then she sees a vision of Jackson that she assumes is a spirit called a Haint, who makes her vow to protect Lily. She does, and then Mayor Washington and his son Cyrus come inside and ask her if Gideon's vaccine works. She tells them that she didn't turn because he gave it to her, and the mayor takes that as proof that it's safe, even though she expressed to them both that it hadn't prevented anyone she knew from turning. The mayor walks out, and Cyrus tells Jane how Gideon has too much confidence in his walls and weapons before leaving her. Catherine awakens stricken with anxiety, but answers the door when Callie and Sue knocks. There's a town meeting and they rush to attend. The crowd is split between the white folk of Summerland and the wealthy people of color of Nicodemus. Gideon speaks to the crowd, telling them that nearly 20,000 shamblers gather a quarter mile south of town. They haven't progressed and are motionless for some reason, but he believes his vaccine will save them, presenting Ida as an example of its effectiveness. Apparently, Ida decided to side with Gideon for some reason.
That's weird.
Afterwards, when they question her, she tells Catherine that Gideon promised they wouldn't do patrol duty alone this time. Callie stays behind to talk to Gideon, who she seems taken with. She kind of has like a little crush going. Catherine visits Jane to tell her what's been going on, but Jane tells her what she learned about Jackson and then lashes out at the girl even as Catherine tries to comfort her. She leaves before Jane can see her cry. She runs into Sue, who advises her to gear up, and they walk off to get Catherine's weapons. On the way, Sue tells Catherine how Jane met Jackson one night while doing her Angel of the Crossroads thing. She found out he was seeing another girl, and that was Jane's first heartbreak courtesy of Jackson. Their convo is cut short when they see Miss Duncan being sus and follow her. Jane is set free by Sheriff Redfern, having been found innocent. He gives her back her weapons and he tells her he worries he can't stop her from getting herself killed. He tells her about the family that ran the combat school that he went to. The first night, his friends ran off, but he stayed because the outside world was so uncertain at the time that he wasn't sure if he'd have a family even to go back to. The Redferns, that was the family, they had a daughter named Betsy who trained alongside them. She felt everyone had to do their part to help fight the dead in this world. One day, while clearing a farm, she sacrificed herself to save them. Daniel says she shouldn't have been out there in the first place. Jane thinks about something her mother said. It's the American way, she would say, watching from the porch as another family took up residence at Rose Hill. You help as much as you can, but no more. You don't think those founding fathers wrote all those pretty words about independence just to help the poor, do you? The books are right there in the library, Jane. They did it because they didn't want to pay taxes, to have some king tell them the price of tea. And for that, they went to war, and hundreds of people died. If that ain't capitalism, I don't know what is. Daniel tells her sometimes you have to do things you don't like to survive, even if it's a lonely life. Catherine and Sue follow Miss Duncan to the less residential part of town to a line of white folk outside of a building. Inside is Gideon, who ran out of serum. Miss Duncan talks with him in private and tells the gathered crowd that he is busy making more. Sue reveals to Catherine that she is suspicious of Amelia since she started getting romantic with Daniel. Catherine runs into Jane at Gideon's house, but goes to her room to rest. Jane eats some food and sleeps, waking to Sue and Callie at the door. Jane apologizes to Catherine for earlier, and they are then shown to a freshly chopped down hole in the wall. They find two sets of tracks, a man and woman's. Catherine goes to find Miss Duncan, Ida goes to arm the patrol kids, and Sue and Jane stick together. Catherine stops at the house to pick up extra weapons and runs into Gideon. He confesses that he tore down the wall with Callie after he mucked up the sewer and accidentally infected the Summerland folk who needed to be vaccinated. He locked them in his lab, but knew they'd get out. So with Callie, they made the hole in the hopes that they would naturally join the horde, logical conclusion, I guess.
Are you kidding me? Are you out of your mind?
Catherine tells Gideon off for lacking common sense, gathers Lily and some provisions, and they run out. Sue and Jane try alerting the townspeople, but no one cares, and they run into Gideon's escaped lab accident. The Duchess and her girls are among the shamblers, never having even made it out of town. Even the boy, Thomas, has turned, and Jane is the one that has to put him down.
Why? Why? Why?
They run into Lucas, Ida, and the other patrol kids, and they begin forming up into a wedge formation as the horde finally breaches the southern gate. They make for the northern gate as a unit, but arrive to the site of their only exit crawling with shamblers who attack the kids guarding it. Things begin to fall apart, and they engage in melee combat, but Jane's penny gets icy cold as she goes to hack into a shambler woman, and she misses. But the woman's teeth sinks into her forearm,
What?
and Jane shoves her off and continues fighting with the others until everything is calm. Everyone stares at Jane's bite. Catherine can barely register what's happening as Sue urges everyone onward. Catherine stays to hear Jane's last word and flees with Lily and the others. Jane fights more shamblers with her quickly fading strength before locking herself in the sheriff's jail cell to meet her end. Catherine flees with the others past the barbed wire fences, only stopping once to have Sue loosen up her corset. They also halt when a fast vehicle approaches, an iron pony much larger and lugging more carts than most. Catherine pretends to be a widowed white woman with her household to the driver, who is from New Orleans but living at Fort Riley. It's their response to an SOS signal sent to them from Nicodemus. Jane awakens inside Gideon's house, the dead quietly milling about outside. Gideon's there and he tells her that they're both immune. He learned the dead also ignore you as a side effect after he was bitten, working under Professor Gehring in Baltimore. He was sick for a while before his body got rid of the virus, and Jane will experience that too. Shots ring through the house as Gideon flees and Callie walks in carrying a rifle. She was also in love with Gideon, and he gave her the vaccine in Nicodemus when he flip-flopped between the two settlements. She tells Jane she'll have to amputate her arm as the dead woman took a huge chunk of meat out of her. Part 2 begins as The Road to Perdition, 1 year and 5 months later. Catherine's chapters now begin with quotes from fictional literature about California, describing it as an oasis in a shambler-filled world. Catherine is aboard the ship the Capitan, bound for San Francisco. She had traveled to New Orleans after the whole ordeal, and then on to Nicaragua, and now to California with Sue, Lily, and a new gentleman named Carolina Jones. He helped Sue and Catherine get jobs protecting the ladies aboard the ship, and hasn't made any advancements on them because he prefers the company of men.
Interesting.
She's finishing up a game of poker, possibly Texas Hold'em, with Carolina and Dr. Nelson, a white passing man with a Nicaraguan valet named Hector. Catherine wins, having bribed someone to help her cheat, and splits her pot with Carolina. They've kind of been running a hustle to make extra money along the way. Catherine hopes to open a millinery, a place to make and sell women's hats. Carolina asks her if she's sure about staying in California, and she assures him she can take care of herself. She remembers how Sue, Lily, and her had wound up at Fort Riley for a time. Ida and the other patrol kids made a break for the Lost States immediately. Sue, Lily, and Catherine snuck out one night and went to the Mississippi and caught a boat south to New Orleans, where they rested and trained with the Laveau girls. It was there that Sue found a book claiming that California was free of shamblers, and they figured it's the safest place to raise Lily and for Sue to find a husband. In this part, Jane's chapters begin with quotes from Western/cowboy literature, mostly about like bounty hunters and stuff. Here we are introduced to a reborn bounty hunter, Jane, going after her latest bounty, a man named William Jefferson Perry. She has to take care of some other men who try to ambush her in a bar in Monterey, California, and then she has her terrier, Salty, grab any stragglers. Callie is there too. They've been making their way west together. They also sell guns from the dead they come across, as the Shambler has made gunsmiths a hot commodity in the West. He tries bribing her, and they offer her the location of Gideon Carr. He says the scientist is hiding out with Thurman Leaks, a robber baron famous in California. Jackson goes tells her he's being honest, but she still decides to cut off his ears as she sends out Callie to confirm his bounty with the sheriff. It's petty revenge for the way he carved up a woman named Ella May in Carson City. Catherine and company arrive at Angel Island and are processed by a Chinese woman who mistakes Catherine for white, ushering them quickly through since they're not immigrants. They then catch the ferry to San Francisco where they're greeted by the sight of Spanish and Chinese architecture. Carolina followed them into the city to escort them to their boarding house. On the way, he explains how the Chinese rose to power in the city by pushing out colored folk from patrol duties. The white folk have fled north to Willamette. Most black folk with the means have moved south to Sacramento. Many native Californios, the indigenous Spanish mixed race population, have nowhere else to go, so they're kind of stuck in the city. They arrive at Mellie Mae's boarding house in the south part of the city by the wall. Miss Miss May is Carolina's younger sister. She's getting ready to make her way to Sacramento to escort some folks into the mountains. Her ex-girlfriend left her, breaking her heart along the way, leaving her with no reason to stay. She invites Catherine, Lily, and Sue inside to talk. Jane and Callie collect the bounty from the sheriff after dumping off the bodies of Perry and his cronies. The sheriff deducts pay because of the state of Perry's body. She didn't stop torturing him until he told her Gideon was in Sacramento, and then she cut off his nose and ears. It's really gross. They head back to the hotel manager stopping them at the door because of their dog, but stops when he realizes they're covered in blood, and Jane threatens him a little. Jane orders a bath to be brought up, and they go to their room. Callie asks Jane how she does it, and Jane thinks about all they've been through together as Callie sits in her lap.
Gay!
While Jane was healing up in Nicodemus, Callie foraged the nearby towns, then taught Jane how to look out for dangers beyond Shamblers. They then headed west, arriving at Wisconsin territory before encountering sightings of Gideon. From there, they arrived at Denver, where they started bounty hunting. Jane executed the O'Reillys for killing a black family in their sleep, knowing it's not illegal to do so in Colorado territory, and they wouldn't be punished for it. So she kind of took out her own brand of vigilante justice. Rightfully so, in my opinion. They also told Jane how Gideon went to California. Callie worries about Jane's soul, the stress of killing, and how it's weighing on her, and how she still sees Jackson. Jane laughs and their bath is brought in. Callie asks Jane if she doesn't want more out of life than revenge. They wash in silence before sleeping together, Jane never answering Callie. Catherine and Sue spend the night at the boarding house, with Catherine waking early to a cat in her room. She's allergic, and Sue comes in to give her breakfast. They talk about the systemic injustice faced by black folk before leaving early to join the wagon train. The outfit is bound for a place just a bit further inland of Sacramento called Haven, which Catherine remembers is where Jane's mother said she was. They arrive to see the wagon train of over 100 people with scarcely a handful of inexperienced defenders. They meet Louisa Alkine, the woman in charge, and tell her they're there to work. She's grateful because Juliet, her close friend, is the only experienced person she had to protect the whole lot of them. She is also a former Miss Preston's girl, and they all get along well because of that. Jane awakens to find Callie missing and most of her stuff, and even her letters and money gone. All Callie left was a note telling Jane she loves her, but she went home. Jackson appears telling Jane she shouldn't be surprised. Jane gathers herself together and heads to the sheriff's office to inquire about a bounty, a man who robbed a bank in LA who may have gone to Sacramento. It's not much, but Jane is hellbent on getting her vengeance. Catherine thinks about her journey from Baltimore to Summerland to Nicodemus, south along the Mississippi to New Orleans, and then further south to the jungles of South America. There, her and friends traveled west and then north to San Francisco. She thinks about this as she watches the 150 men, women, and children file out of the city and past the Great Golden Wall, a design of Thomas Edison. It was built by the Chinese, inspired by the Great Wall, and then added to by Edison and other white folk with wiring along the outside. They can activate an electric field to keep out a shambler attack, but it's also never had to deal with large hordes, so... The plan is to travel to Sacramento and then up into the mountains. Carolina tells Catherine that he thinks Lily is haunted, and Catherine says she has been through a lot and hopes to find a place where Lily can have an actual childhood. Jane visits a familiar saloon to gather information about David Johnson, where a half-starved orphan named Tomas translates the Spanish conversations for her in exchange for some food. The search is fruitless, and Maria, the owner's mother, gives Jane a man to hunt down for taking advantage of a young woman. She decides to take Tomas with her, agreeing to get him boots once they have some money. Catherine wakes up for her turn at the watch as the wagon camps for the night. Her and Carolina talking as they stumble upon some children poking at an unconscious, bloody white man. Dr. Nelson comes to examine the body. A dog is near the body, and it belongs to a girl with one arm who walks out of the gloom. She points a gun and tells them to back away as the body springs awake, and she fires a single shot into his skull, startling everyone. Catherine is shocked to see Jane, but Jane gives her little attention, straining to keep her own emotions under control. Carolina is distrustful of her, doubting she was actually on a bounty. He points his gun at her, she points hers back at him as she empties the corpse's pockets. Doc Nelson offers to help Jane transport the body to the sheriff in Sacramento if she stays to help guard them. Carolina goes to speak with Juliet and Louisa about it, not a fan of Jane off rip. Catherine, meanwhile, is just silent until Jane learns they're going into the mountains. She reveals to the reborn girl that they're headed to a town called Haven. With an Irish goodbye, though, Jane calls Tomas and walks away from Catherine.
No, I'm still sad.
Catherine continues her watch and comes across Louisa and Juliet around a fire as others in the wagon wake up to make breakfast. Catherine assures the women that Jane is of Miss Preston's quality as they hand her a paper with an article that explains Jane's exploits in Denver. Jane appears and tells the women her price and that she only made it out west because she is immune. She only cares to tag along as far as Sacramento, telling Catherine she means to kill Gideon Carr. Catherine finally understands how far Jane has fallen in her path for revenge. As Jane walks, Tomas asks her what she still needs from him for. She gives him salty and tells him to go on Shambler watch as the wagon train makes its slow walk to Sacramento. He leaves and Jane is joined by Catherine and then Sue, who asks her what happened, and she tells her sisters in arms how she was nursed back to health in Nicodemus and how she saw the undead Miss Duncan walking the streets of the town. She swore to kill Gideon then and then traveled west with Callie until the girl had enough of the self-destructive behavior. Catherine shares how she and the others escaped Fort Riley on her wedding night on horseback after meeting Carolina Jones, before going south and westward. They're interrupted by shouts as Tomas warns about the coming casi muertos, which is Spanish for half or almost dead. He tells them the dead are in the river as they move towards the commotion. The train had been traveling parallel to the Sacramento River to avoid the dangers of the faster routes. Carolina and Juliet move in the opposite direction, saying that there's too many, around 50, probably from a ship that turned, and the train may have to make a break for it. The wagon continues on as Catherine, Sue, and Jane stay behind to cut down the swarm of shamblers trying to claw their way out of the river. Jane goes ahead and takes out most of them with ease, as they ignore her with Catherine and Sue picking off the rest. They catch up to the wagon as it turns to cross a bridge away from the river. Lily, who is shocked to see Jane, tells them more dead came from the river. Tomas translates some workers yelling along the bridge, who talk about the growing number of shamblers coming from upriver. In one of the western tales, we learn that Jane once went after a couple who had kidnapped children of color and was planning to sell them into slavery. Honestly, she did what she had to do.
Talking about? That's why he's the MVP. That's why he's the GOAT. The GOAT.
Jane sends Tomas with Lily to gather firewood. Jackson's ghost appears again, telling her that she may now have the chance to atone for her sin of killing him. Clearly, her psyche still carries that guilt. Jane is upset that they're headed more north than northeast towards Sacramento, because she knows the horde flowing downstream was most likely Gideon. Juliet announces to the wagon that they're most likely going to try and head into the mountains to stay safe. Catherine tells the crowd that she believes the dead came from a fallen town. She has seen it before and advises against even attempting a route in that direction. Thaddeus Stevens addresses the crowd, saying they should assess the threat first before deciding to move into the mountains. Carolina agrees, wanting to hire more guns when they got to Sacramento. Stevens suggests sending an expedition, and Jane volunteers. Stevens wants to go as well, and so does a young father named Jebediah. Catherine also demands to go despite Jane advising against it. They head out with their respective weapons, Jane with her falchion, however you say that, Catherine with her twin short swords, Carolina with his claymore. Everyone carries guns. Jane and Carolina have pistols, and the rest have rifles. Jane gives Jeb a short sword, but Stevens insists he doesn't need a blade. They retrace the wagon's tracks to the river and use a spyglass from Stevens to see the river is churning with the horde that is freshly turned and heading west towards San Francisco.
Oh shit. Here we go again.
Carolina says they definitely need to head into the mountains, but Jane and Catherine are going after Gideon in Sacramento. He tells the young women that they're gonna follow the Feather River towards Haven. Together they head upriver a few miles before camping for the night, far from the Sacramento River. Jane tells Catherine that she tried not to think about the others, otherwise she would have come apart. She wakes early in the morning before the sunrise to see a scared and frozen Catherine. They're surrounded by the dead, who are also frozen and quiet, waiting. Jane tells Catherine to wait until sunrise to take care of the Shamblers without making any noise, before Catherine exclaims that this is what happened to Nicodemus, the dead motionless outside the walls, reacting to the vaccinated. Gideon wanted to make a vaccine that makes the Shamblers ignore you, but the vaccine only makes the dead hesitate until the vaccine has fully taken to your body after much time. Jane is beside herself with this freshly open scar as she thinks about how the dead ambushed Jackson back on the farm outside Summerland. Catherine tries to comfort her by asking about Tomas as they walk towards Sacramento. It is strangely void of any signs of activity, living or dead. Jane says she has no attachments to Tomas, and that she plans to abandon him at an orphanage. Catherine switches the convo to books. On the bridge, a ways outside the city, they see that it is on fire and only Shamblers roam the streets. An old prospector in a rowboat spots them and tells them about how the infection spread and how word was sent out on horseback. Jane says she has to at least check in Sacramento for a lead. Catherine swallows past her own battle of emotion before agreeing to go along. They don't make it far into the city's outskirts before the smoke from the burning neighborhoods makes it hard to push on. Jane asks Catherine why she came along, and she tells her she won't leave Jane again. Shamblers pop up and they beat a hasty retreat to the bridge they crossed that morning.
Get your ass up! We gotta get the fuck out of here now!
They decide to head back to the wagon train as Gideon's trail has gone cold. It's there around a fire with Stevens reading scripture from the book of Revelations to an anxious crowd. That's the apocalypse one, mind you. Jane and Catherine are invited by Juliet to a gathering group made up of Carolina, his sister Louisa, and Jeb. She tells them that they have a problem, that the detour means they only have supplies to last 4 days, so it's suggested that they take an alternative route along the Siskiyou Trail into the mountains. Jane offers some of her bounty to help re-up supplies when they can and asks about Haven, and they say it's a 3-week hard travel still. With that, and some hope that the coming winter will keep the dead at bay, they commit to the journey. It's day after day, waking at the break of dusk to climb uphill. They find refugees from destroyed western cities on the road. They stop at Abbotsville to pick up provisions. There they hear awful rumors, mostly against the people of color being blamed for the horde somehow.
You can excuse racism.
Jane purchases extra clothes for Tomas and for her for the colder weather. She even takes time in the evenings to teach him to read from a book of poetry she bought. Catherine hopes it means Jane is coming back from who she has become. She even notes one of the ladies, who may have a crush on Jane, knitted her and Tomas a scarf and socks, respectively. The lady liked the look of Jane in her trousers. As the weeks wore on, dozens left their wagon to stay in the towns they stopped at. One group broke off to head to Eureka, California. While resting one night along the Siskiyou Trail, Catherine tells Jane that Stephen has been trying to court her. She doesn't believe it until the man walks over and tries sharing some cornbread with her. Jane is shocked and disgusted at the realization.
Oh! Ew! Dude! What the fuck?
Catherine leaves to hide her grin, spotting Sue with Roy, a blacksmith they picked up in Abbotsville. Sue seems really taken with Roy, and Catherine thinks about how she might be on her own with just Lily soon. Her thoughts are interrupted by a commotion, and she goes to stop a fight between one of the members of their party and a beaten-up stranger, who turns out to be Daniel Redfern. He's there looking for Jane. He wants her help to track down and kill Gideon. Catherine invites him reluctantly to have some food and sit by their fire as he recounts his tale. How he wound up with the Carr family as their security after the Lancaster Academy, where he found himself protecting Gideon while he studied in Baltimore under Professor Gehring. He was the one who was there the night Gideon had been bitten, but let him live. Gideon went on to test his vaccine on the rest of his household staff, many of whom he subjected to immediate testing and turning Shambler just as quick. Daniel was the only one he didn't let get bitten right away, but Gideon was sent to Summerland. There he had all the test subjects he needed in the colored patrols. When Daniel was sent out west, he turned to Nicodemus for help before everything went sideways. He wants revenge for Amelia Duncan dying, and he was subsequently bitten that day too, discovering he was immune as well. He made it to Denver before picking up Gideon's trail, tracking it to Mexico and LA before he lost it after Sacramento. Catherine, Sue, and Jane go aside to talk, with Sue stating the obvious. Jane will go with Daniel to hunt down Gideon, and Catherine is going with her. Sue is going to stay back to keep an eye on Lily and Tomas. They travel for 2 days. The nights are cold as winter hasn't fully left the Sierra Nevada. When Catherine leaves Daniel to watch for the evening while she rests her eyes, she makes a grave mistake. She awakens to a gun pointed at her and quickly moves to disarm the attacker and take his gun. But it's too late. Jane says they've been had.
I'm in danger!
It's been Gideon behind the whole ruse to test his experiment. He leads the group to his hideout, merely a few yards into the woods past the makeshift camp. It has 2 small buildings and a water wheel squeaking loudly, I'm sure, to power his facility. Inside is a much better lab than the one Gideon had in Summerland, and even an assistant named Plimpton. They lock Jane and Catherine in a shambler cage, and Gideon, Redfern, and Plimpton walk into a room with a man who proceeds to scream in terror. The hired guns, who helped capture the girls, leave, not wanting to listen to any of that. Jane tries looking out as Catherine points out the key that Daniel dropped on his way to the room with Gideon. They don't trust it but grab it as Gideon and the other 2 men follow him out of the room. Gideon says the man turned in less than a minute, the fastest turning so far. Jane tries distracting him by telling him some of her observations on the vaccine. She says he's an impatient idiot, not getting that he, Jane, and Callie were all vaccinated months in advance. He takes notes and tells her he's sorry about what happened in Nicodemus to the Duchess and her girls. She tells him he sold his soul and asks if he even regrets who he has become. Catherine whispered that Jane is nothing like him. Gideon then shocked the cage so he can inject Catherine with his latest test.
You raggedy bitch.
The next chapter begins with a letter from Thomas Edison's assistant describing the horde that surrounded the Great Golden Wall of San Francisco and how the others have fled to the sea already. I am afraid the dream of California is ended. The dead have taken Sacramento and move en masse to San Francisco. They converge on the wall, their moans echoing day and night. I am the last one left here in the compound. Everyone else has fled, taken to the sea. The poor scrabble at our doors, demanding assistance that we cannot give. Will my wall hold? I have no idea, but I will not be here to witness the outcome. Henry Forsyth, assistant to Mr. Thomas Edison, 1882.
Man, it's game over, man. It's game over. What the fuck are we gonna do now? What are we gonna do?
Catherine and Jane eventually get up, and as they make to leave with the key they had stowed away, Catherine begins to feel sick in the worst way. She tells Jane she feels like she's dying as she barely is able to hold herself up. Daniel comes through with the weapons as Jane opens the cell. Voices approach as Jane grabs a glass beaker, breaks it, and stabs it into the first man through the door, Plimpton. Gideon barely has time to realize as Jane holds him at the point of the broken beaker. Catherine tells her not to kill him, and he seizes the chance to swing a vial at Jane, missing her and causing the lab to go up in flames. He shoves Jane and flees as Daniel chases, and Catherine begs her to stay. She refuses to give up on Jane, but Jane leaves to chase Gideon. She runs right into a small skirmish of Gideon's hired goons, who she quickly dispatches before trying to find Daniel and Gideon, but gives up after getting lost. She then comes to her senses, runs back into the burning building full of smoke to rescue Catherine, who she finds unconscious. As she drags her out, she sees Jackson in all white as she yells as she refuses to let Catherine fall to this cruel world. He disappears as the smoke clears and she escapes with Catherine. Only to come to gunpoint by Gideon Carr. He tells Jane they're more alike than she would like to admit, before Catherine just shoots him in the chest. Daniel and Jane take her to the other building to lay her on a cot as Daniel goes to ensure the gunmen won't reanimate. They spend the next 3 days foraging for chickens and other food, as well as locating haven from their encampment. Catherine awakens, still weak, and they spend another 2 days resting. Already gone a week from the wagon train, before journeying through the mountains to Haven. It takes about a week before they stumble upon the town, Sue being the first to spot them. She was helping to build a new home for her and Roy, who are engaged to be married. The moment comes to a stop when Jane's mother sees her and comes rushing up. Jane asks about Aunt Aggie, and Ophelia tells her that she didn't make it out west. Her heart gave out.
You are breaking my heart.
As she continues to tell Jane about her new husband and life since she left, Jane just turns and leaves the conversation. She spends the next 2 weeks helping shore up the defenses and avoiding her mother as much as possible. She feels restless even as everyone finds purpose. Ophelia married Haven's Mayor Robert, and her way of not liking unseemly things rubs against the person Jane has become. A messy and complicated person. Catherine takes up teaching defense to some of the people in town, and Carolina Jones and his sister have become surrogate parents to Tomas. Jane decided that she is going to leave after Sue gets married. The month of May is a blur of activity as things get underway, and Stevens leads the ceremony when Sue marries Roy. Later, he takes Jane aside and tries to offer her an arm and a proposal. He built her like a prosthetic arm. She declines his proposal, and he takes it like a champ, helping her to put on the arm even. She even asks about attaching a knife as they go dance. The party turns into a farewell as the newlyweds sneak off for the evening. Jane's mother doesn't see her off, but Jane does say goodbye to Robert and her new little brothers. Robert gives her a letter from her mother. Jane tucks it away, planning to burn it the first chance she gets. She doesn't want to read it. It also feels like a slap in the face considering the fact that the letter was written on her mother's signature lavender paper that she brought all the way from Baltimore. But yet, Aunt Aggie didn't make it. Daniel joins her, wanting to also right the injustices that he witnessed along the way. As they prepare to leave, Catherine runs up in a loosely tied corset. Jane tries to tell her to stay, but Catherine says they're friends, that she cares about Jane and won't let her go off into the world without her. I really lost it at this point because their friendship is so genuine and so full of love.
Oh, boo-hoo! Let me play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
Together, the three of them ride off into the unknown. This duology was so fun. I mean, it also tore my heart in half because we don't get a lot of queer platonic romances, and their love for each other is so honest and painful. They continue to endure and survive in the face of oppression and adversity and a twisted perversion of our own world. It's a really good duology. A lot happens on this journey. The pacing can be a little questionable at times, but it gives you which makes sense if you want to give both girls proper time to have their own arcs. Jane finding her way back from the edge of darkness as Catherine seeks to rebuild herself after so much grief and loss. A lot like the first book, both girls are a mirror of one another's story. Also, this book had so many queer characters, along with the references to Jane's many romances and crushes, and Catherine's struggle with anxiety. Ireland really pulls the curtain back on the probable reality many faced when the words for these things both didn't exist and were not commonplace. Until its dying breath, the United States held on to the visage of a country that refuses to die. And yet, from east to west, the Shamblers made the country unlivable, only propelled by the cruelty that already permeated American government and its people. There's also some short stories that also tie into the world of the Dread Nation. I'd like to get into that into the future at some point. Ireland has also written many more amazing stories afterwards that are worth checking out if you haven't already. I'll catch you all in the next one. I have a bunch of books I've yet to cover and can never make up my mind what to read next, but hopefully it'll be something exciting and I hope you enjoy it. Catch you all in the next one. Bye.
Bye!